I had a certain internal experience that led me to believe I was a certain type of athlete.
And why are you laughing?
Because I can relate.
It's funny because it's true, Kevin. Welcome to Shankcast episode number 5. Ooh, podcast voice is solid today. Feel good about it. Today we're going to be talking about why does tennis drive you crazy? So myself, Kevin, Megan, we're going to be drawing from our own experiences as players, as coaches today, and we'll be answering 3 primary questions. For ourselves personally, why does tennis drive you crazy? Question number 2, what has worked best to take the craziness away? So basically our own personal perspective and take on hopefully how we've improved
I'm like,
over the years. Well, I guess we can be our own judge of whether or not we've traveled further down the path towards tennis enlightenment.
Or the other way.
or the other way. And question number 3, what do you say to your crazy students? And of course, tongue in cheek here a little bit. I'm putting crazy in air quotes, and yet everybody listening to this, I think, just innately knows what I'm talking about. You can't play tennis at any level of competition. I don't care how long you've been playing or what level you are. If you've been playing for more than a couple of months and pursuing it, something has happened to you on the court that you walked off the court afterwards that you were ashamed of.
Oh, wow. That's a whole nother level.
Agree or disagree? I mean, tennis just has a way of bringing stuff out of people.
I think it brings out your personality for sure. Like there's those underlying, whether you have actually let it come out of the mouth or you're verbalized.
Do you have some personal experience you want to share with us, Megan?
100% of personal experience, but that's a whole different. Some people are really good at keeping it all in. Now, I'm not saying that they haven't done something that's shameful, but 2 months is pretty. You might still be not as crazy as the rest of us.
After just a couple months.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no question. The longer period of time in the sport, I think there's a kind of a bell curve. And it's like you start off nice and low. And, oh, this is fun. This is great. And you're getting twice as good every other week. And then all of a sudden, the feelings start to bubble up. The first time you hit a plateau, it's like, what? Why is this happening to me? And then the first day that you
go backwards.
Yeah, you go backwards and you play half as good as you can. Then stuff starts.
I think that's the thing. You have to play competition at some point, some sort, whether it's point play, leagues, whatever. And then you have to actually want to improve. If you have those 2 things,
sure.
But there are a few people out there that just play at the park for fun, and
God bless
they
them.
might not ever feel that.
Yeah, it's
craziness.
Absolutely. Yeah, I admit. Yeah, I'm definitely speaking to a subset of the tennis playing population. But I think that subset is our primary audience.
Yeah, that's you listening right now. Just so you
got problems.
If you compete.
we all got problems.
We feel you.
Okay.
All right, so question number 1, why does tennis drive you crazy? Should I go first?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, I'll go first. So I think it's a combination. I've been trying to talk this out for over a decade now on the Essential Tennis Podcast. It's good self-therapy.
I was just going to say that's your therapy.
No, it really is. Yeah, I get to sit down every week, make an outline, and be like, why does this happen? Let's try to deconstruct this. And I think there's a couple key elements that, when combined, create kind of a special chemistry of psychological dissonance. It's my sentence of the day.
AKA
combustion.
AKA crazy. One of them is, I'm going to go through a few, and these are in no particular order because it's kind of off the top of my head. But one is a huge detachment. There's a big gulf between reality and perception for tennis players of all levels, but especially amateur players. And it was true for me. I'm an amateur player, and it was absolutely true for me too. Before I started seeing myself on video, I had a certain internal experience that led me to believe I was a certain type of athlete.
And why are you laughing?
Because I can relate.
It's funny because it's true, Kevin. And over the years of watching myself thousands of times on video, my internal experience is now much closer to reality. There's still, I'm sure, blind spots that I have. There's no doubt in my mind. But it's nowhere near where it used to be 10, 15 years ago before I saw myself on video over and over and over again, demonstrating, hitting balls, like working with students, just standing there. Like, what the hell am I doing with my shoulders? Like, just trying. I thought I had good posture. Apparently not. But in all seriousness, like little things like that all start to, you have just that little bit of self-awareness extra each experience like that. And hopefully those of you listening have had some of those experiences. If you hide from the truth, which most tennis players do, and they never see the truth on video, then we kind of keep leading a lie in our own heads. And it's exposed when we lose to somebody that we don't perceive to be as good as we are. And when we use our internal measuring stick against the measuring stick of what just happened on the like real life, and there's like 2,000 feet of empty space in between like what we think was supposed to happen.
2,000 feet.
You've really thought this. You spent a lot of time
What was
on this.
supposed to happen and what just happened. That drives people crazy because they can't I can never think of this word. The accounting term, I've brought this up multiple times, like during lessons. Reconcile, that's it. I'm getting better. They can't reconcile those two, like the gap between those two realities. And so when you add on top of that, I think another big element is, and then I'll pass on to somebody else. Another big element, this could just be me talking for an hour.
This is just the
Another big element
Ian podcast.
is lack of understanding of the depths of the game. People don't understand how big of a gap there is from 2-5 to 3-0 and 3-0 to 3-5 and 5-0 to the players that you see on TV. People just don't, and I'm not blaming him. I'm not like wagging my finger. Like, I didn't get it either until like several years after college. And that's because I didn't have the direct and indirect experiences of hitting against somebody who was, ATP 500 or 600 in the world, and having teammates that I sparred and competed against daily go and try, features. It wasn't until after those things happened that I knew my place, like in the tennis world. And so if you have really poor understanding of like the big picture perspective of like the depth of the game, and you have really poor self understanding and like self-awareness of like, here's who I really am as a player and where I fit into that, huge diagram, then it's hard to go out there day after day after day and like work hard and sweat and like push yourself and see like tiny incremental improvements or even like big steps back can just drive you crazy. And then you add on top of that the gasoline of like being a perfectionist.
Mm-hmm.
You're really,
yeah, I'm really on the couch. I'm on the couch right now, and stuff can just go really bad in a hurry. So that's why tennis drives me crazy.
Anything else, Ian Westerman?
Yeah, I know.
Oh yeah, I could keep going. But those three, that's like the holy trinity of tennis insanity, I think, for me. And I've improved, I believe, all three of those things over the years. My perspective and my perfectionism, like, is always going to be there. That's definitely the one that's toughest for me. I'm getting better at it. And I think the perspective and the self-awareness helps also. Be like, come on, like, what are you really, like, let's have some like big picture view on what just happened on this chunk of asphalt.
You feel better?
Yeah, it was good.
It's good.
It was good. Yeah.
Good.
You look
Okay.
a little lighter.
Yeah, I feel good. Kevin,
Oh, wow.
why does tennis drive you crazy?
I would say, kind of to tag on a couple things you said. First of all, expectation. I think, especially in the
took
beginning,
mine.
you don't know what you don't know, and it creates this level of expectation about which you're lying to yourself because you expect something, but you really don't know what to expect.
How
so you expect,
realistic it actually is.
and you're just totally you just totally have this picture in mind of what it should be when you have no business even thinking about or being in that arena.
Yeah.
The second thing I would say is I think a lot of times people come to tennis or they come to, and it gets tied in with your self-worth and your self-image. And so if you were never an athlete and you come to playing tennis and you're like, oh, I'm going to do this athlete. And then you start competing, you're like, And the first...
Especially if you've wanted business or life.
Yeah. If you've had any other successful... if you've been successful in any other arena, you kind of bring that kind of pride into tennis. And when you first compete and you lose, it's not about the like, oh, I just lost. It's like, I must not be better.
Ego.
Ego comes in. It's like, I'm a bad tennis player. Maybe I'm not as good as that other person. And all these weird things happen where your self-worth, how you feel about who you are, it gets tangled up into your tennis game. And so it becomes this kind of nasty cycle of like, I lose, and then you don't want that to happen again, don't want to experience that pain. So
you try harder.
You try harder, and then you don't know if you might win some, and that like spurs you on, and then you meet someone else, and you have the expectation, and you lose, and you're like, it's this roller coaster of like, I feel good, I feel bad. I'm not a good person. And I don't mean like not a good person and other people see you as not a good person, but it's like I am my self-worth. Hey, wait your turn. Wait your turn before you start digging the hole. But your self-worth of like because I think deep down the dark side of human nature is that we never want to feel like we are less than someone else. And if there's a kind of a direct kind of like way of someone kind of beating us
in numbers,
like in numbers or anything, and it's like other people's society sees you as like, oh wow, you lost to that person, and it gets even worse. Thirdly, when you lose to someone who you're not supposed to lose to, and that is just like the ultimate meltdown, and especially when it's happening.
It's back to expectations.
It's this cycle of like you're out there and you're like, oh my God, everybody's watching. I'm not supposed to lose this person. Yeah. They're horrible. I'm supposed to be better. And it's just like, and then when you finally like that final last point of like realization that you just lost, and you have to at some point step off the court, and you have to at some point, like when someone, this is the worst. You step off the court.
You're explaining my feeling when you hit the lefty forehand winner on me yesterday.
I saw that yesterday.
There's that moment where it's like you come like face to face with reality.
Ian was really upset yesterday.
And it's like I have to.
We talked about that a little bit.
I have to deal with this right now.
Yeah. We both like everyone went silent and Ian just walked off the court.
Yeah.
And there's that moment, that realization where you come off the court or the last point, and someone goes, how'd you do? I mean, and you feel so small, and you want to give the quickest, like, blah, 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 and you just want to like go, but you know, like you're gonna run into more people, and if it's a community, it's like
go hide.
You want to go hide, but there's no place to hide. You're totally exposed as the loser. And
you're getting naked, Kevin.
Yeah. Oh, I'm gonna get naked.
Not literally, podcast listeners.
But yeah.
That's office code for vulnerability.
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely think those are some elements
I'm still on the couch.
People are leaving listening right now.
Yeah. They're like, okay, this isn't the one. But those are, I think, for me, the major elements of kind of what can drive you crazy. The self-expectation. I think one of the biggest things that I had to deal with later on in my kind of tennis career is the mixing of your self-worth, your identity into a tennis game, especially as you compete at different levels, but it can get mixed up in any different level, whether you're really successful at another thing and you bring that kind of like attitude. Like, I love this when doctors, if you're a doctor, they're super successful doctors and they come to tennis and they're like, okay, like tell me what to do, I'll do it.
Why am I not a 5-0 yet?
Yeah, or some profession where it's like very kind of like study hard, work hard, and you get the results, and they realize later on that tennis doesn't work that way. Like you can do all the right stuff.
Effort in, results out.
Oh yeah.
I love. It's like a equal like in and out.
That equation will completely mess your mind up in a tennis game.
Yeah.
In the sport of tennis, and I think that is just really tough to deal with. And again, the last one is just that moment of the reality of when you lose the match, and having to face everybody and that feeling deep down about who you are. It's like this life-changing moment of like, I have to confront everybody and expose the lack of winningness that I have.
It's like you have to decide in that moment, am I going to accept this or am I creating some story around
you
like
totally
why?
create. Everybody creates a story because it's like, you dude, my
What level
shoulder,
of
my
stress-
shoulder was
Shoulder.
hurting.
Exactly.
My strings were off. And then if you like
the best
accept
match
It
they
was
ever
windy.
played.
yeah, it was windy. And even if you kind of accept it deep down, you're like, it's just like, I feel like it's like
It hurts.
Rocky where he's playing Drago or fighting Drago and he's just taking blows and you just keep taking the blows and you hope at some point it gets it better, but it really doesn't. It just doesn't.
Thanks for
Everybody's
that.
going to pick up golf now.
I know. No, I think, I mean, you guys hit most of them. I think the biggest one for me is the idea of the results in, results out. I think that's always been my go-to because I have that brain. Like, I studied in school.
A plus B equals C.
Right, exactly. And that doesn't happen on the tennis court for me. And so, and for anyone for that matter. And you can't control, for those of you who
That
are
was so
control
hard for me,
freaks
yeah.
like me, like you cannot, and I would say a lot of tennis players like to control situations. Like, well, most of us have a similar personality. You have those outliers for sure, but
She's talking about me.
he's an outlier. But like we like to control. We're that perfectionist. We like things to be right, that kind of thing. And so when we get into the tennis world where we can't control who wins and loses, we can't control the other person on the other side of the court as much as we try. There's just so many situations that you don't have control of. And so it's really hard to focus on the things that you can control and not on the things that you can't control. And that's, I think, one of the hardest battles. And that's what causes craziness, is not understanding the things that you can't control. There's so many people that really and truly believe, like, I can control if I win this match or not. And in many cases, you can't. And so you can try to find ways, but you can't control that actual outcome.
Yeah,
And
I
so
totally agree.
That's probably my number one craziness, is that I can't go out there and say, I'm going to win this by doing
gonna
this,
fix
this, and
this
this.
and this and this and this.
Exactly. I'm going to check my boxes and one of them is going to work, because I might check every box and none of them work.
I think it's the difference between control and influence. They sound very close, but they're very different. And I think when you understand the difference of, you can influence things, but it does not mean you're going to get the results you want.
Right.
It's
Well, you
a
can
tough-
understand that, but still pisses you off, because it does.
Here it goes. Here it goes.
Still makes me angry that I can influence if I want to work so hard to be able to understand the game, go out there and try to use what I have studied at home, what I have put hours and hours into, and you're telling me I'm going to get out on the court and I can't control whether I win or lose. Like, that's a hard thing to swallow for a lot of people.
For sure.
And so you have to love the competition and love all the stuff that we tell people to love, even though, like, that part is so frustrating. And all the things you guys said, like expectations is huge for me. I 100% believe I'm 10 times better than I am when I'm out on the court. I really believe that flat backhand down the line is going in 90% of the time. Right. And it goes in 10% of the time. But, I think that expectations and control are two of the biggest ones for me, probably.
I had an ongoing argument with my doubles partner in college where I literally, my stance in the debate back and forth was, I should reasonably be able to figure out on any given day what's going wrong and figure out the solution to it. And I honestly believe that back in college. That might be
Yeah.
why.
I could
I
see
think
you
there's-
breaking a
yeah.
lot of rackets back in
Mark,
college.
you were right. I didn't break a lot of rackets, but I drove myself absolutely insane.
I think
like
that's
clinically
the
insane.
problem.
I could totally.
is
I mean, if you're
that-
thinking
yeah.
that, I can't even imagine.
Oh, it was terrible.
Yeah.
By the end of college, It was absolutely terrible.
But I think that's why a lot of people end up like they come from other sports, and how many people do we have that say, okay, I played volleyball, I played college this, I played college that, but tennis is so frustrating because there is so many factors. And
that's another good one.
A lot
people
of
don't understand how many variables.
Right. There's a moving ball. There's some targets. There's like some variables that you have to go across. You have to get across the net and you have old habits, you have new habits, you have things that you're trying to work on. You have, I mean, there's so many things going on.
Fist pumping.
Yeah, that can be frustrating. And so I think, no matter
smiling.
what you've done, like how many, overly intelligent, like IQ genius level people play tennis and still
Breaks them
really struggle. Yeah, because
I think people that are
then
smarter, they struggle with it more because it becomes a logical
Yeah.
sequence. They're like, okay,
They can see the answer,
They see
like, right-
they see
right
it's like,
in front of
okay,
them.
well, I do this.
This should
And
happen.
I think the biggest part for me, like all those things, for the most part, I think are the easiest things. I mean, your target, the logic of like doing, it's the emotional part that's disconnected from a lot of players. The emotional part of tennis, where in a lot of other sports you have team sports, you have someone else to rely on. You can check in and check out. Where tennis, you can't check in and check out. You were out there by yourself. You were dealing with the pressures of people watching you and how that pressure, like how you react and how you deal with that pressure, is so much of how good of a tennis player you can become. So I think that's the
Just like a 2-minute checkout is that's the momentum shift. That's the match.
that's the beauty of tennis. And some
play for 2
wacky
hours.
sense.
Yeah, and it's that
Yeah, it's
90
who's gonna blink.
seconds.
If you blink at the wrong moment,
There's another. Add it to the list.
yeah, it's
Yeah, you
Don't
can play the
blink.
best match of your life, and then there's that one,
Yeah.
60-second, 90-second.
But that's where
One-
those expectations come in. You play those certain matches where you literally can probably count them on one hand. Like everything was going right.
Yeah.
And then for some reason, we think that that's how we should play.
Totally.
Like every
Totally.
time we step on the court,
Yeah.
where literally that's the outlier.
It's like a crack
and
dealer.
the crappy ones that we do
giving you a taste.
yeah,
is
give you
like,
a taste of the good stuff, and you always
back
keep
for more.
coming back for more.
Exactly.
You hit that one good forehand, you're like, it could be like this.
Right. I could do that every time.
I can do that every time.
It can feel that good.
Yeah.
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 Say that again. That was really good.
Oh, jeez. Okay, next question. I'm just going to keep this going.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. Next question. What has worked best to take the craziness away? So I'm going first here because I think Kevin and I are kind of close on this one. For me, I think it all started with perspective. And I mentioned earlier direct and indirect examples. I started teaching with a guy who was like number 500, 600 in the world in single. He and I would go out and hit when our lessons canceled. And that gave me a really good like direct, and he was like a couple years out. And that gave me a really solid understanding of like, okay, like
If you can't, like Ian's eyes are very big right now. Like I might have been.
I'm replaying like those serves like in my mind. Like that was like a big key for me. And then I mentioned my teammate going out and playing challengers, low level, entry level professional events, and knowing how I compared to him, and hearing how he did, which is not well. Like he didn't. I don't think he won a match going out and touring over a summer in Europe. So like those kind of things, like those pieces of information started to come in, and it was like, really? Like, and so there's a little bit of perspective there. And at the end of, I've only talked about this a few times ever, but at the end of college, I quit my college team. It was like probably February-ish of my last semester of college. I just walked off the team because I was day after day after day is like it was moving in a worse and worse, a darker and darker direction, and I had to stop. Like it wasn't even worth it anymore. And the stark contrast between that and my entry point, which was like, this is the best ever, like walking onto my college team, reflecting on that, and then the direct comparisons, I started to realize that something was really, really out of place. And then I remember a platform tennis match that I played. I played a couple years in a Washington, D.C. platform tennis league. And I remember a moment where it occurred to me, I think it was like the first like real match that I played in this league. And it occurred to me, I can be out here. This was after taking several years off of competition. And it occurred to me that I can be here on this court and just enjoy the act of hitting the ball, feeling it come off my paddle, like the breaking a sweat, like the camaraderie of playing with my partner and like trying to overcome the challenge of our opponents. Like it kind of came over me almost kind of for the first time, all the things that I really loved and appreciated about competing. And it was like a moment like in the movies where like all the like pieces kind of come together.
The stars sparkle around you.
Yeah, exactly.
A beautiful mind.
And yeah, since then I feel like I've personally worked very, very hard to understand my place and appreciate my place rather than looking at like what Megan was talking about, rather than looking at what I knew I could do and being ungrateful for not doing that every time. More and more, I chose to focus on being grateful for what I was doing that day. No matter what, it's easier said than done, but no matter what my output was that day or what the result was, I've, for a decade now, worked hard at being grateful for whatever that is. Because the reality is there's tons of people that will never experience what I've experienced, and whatever it is that they pursue. And so I think perspective has been key for me. And Kevin, I know you're big on the word gratitude. I'll just throw that in at the end to bridge.
It's interesting because it was good. Mine's maybe slightly different, but it's the same. Perspective, I think, was huge for me. And I think it's also the stage of like where you are in your game. I remember starting very late and then wanting to like, oh, I didn't even know like about tennis. Started playing tennis. Then it was like, oh, I can go to college. And in the back of my mind, it's like, maybe I can work really hard and be a pro.
That's exactly what
And then after I had what was it? It was like my second year in like my first college team. I went out and I played this tournament and got invited to go travel with these guys and play pro like futures tournaments. And it was a really cool group. The guy who let it out, I think his name was Paul, played like #1 at Kentucky, and he recruited like 2 kids from like Clemson who were like top 100 juniors, another kid from California, and somehow I got to tag along. And slowly I got perspective on kind of my place at that time.
His eyes are just as wide as
I remember
Ian's
practicing because we went to this place in, I think, Indiana, and we practiced for like a week, and it was just like hardcore, twice a day. We practice. And I remember like having trouble keeping the ball in play for like 2 weeks long. I remember calling home like, I think I should probably come home. And this was before we played our first.
Pace, or was it the heaviness? Or
it was everything. It was just like the level was a complete jump because all these guys were like NCAA, except for like one guy, NCAA top ranked players. Like one guy who I traveled with later, I traveled with his brother, little brother, and he was like top 30 NCAA and got to like 200, 300 in the world. And I remember just struggling. And I played, like we were going through this tour, and I played in Kansas City on the plaza, and I drew a seed for my first futures, who this guy was like already 800, 700 in the world, tall Australian guy. And I was like praying. And the next court open was Center Court Plaza. Place was packed.
The Plaza is an amazing place to play if you ever get a chance.
I was crapping my pants. I did not want to go out there because I knew it was going to be like a blowout. And it was a blowout. And I got placed on the second to the biggest court. So it was kind of nice because I wasn't like stark, like big open court. So after doing that for about, I think we went out for 4 to 5 weeks, I got a little bit better, and I went back to school and I got better. And then I continued to practice. I transferred to a different school.
What was your mental state like immediately after that match?
After the match, I was like, I just want to hide. Like literally, I just want to bury it. Like if I could get a shovel, dig a hole, and then put the dirt on top of myself and just stay in that hole, I'd still be there. But I would say for me, the perspective change over time was to stop focusing so much on the externals and focus on the internals of what I could do. And when that changed, it helped me. So later on, I went to a different school, bigger Division I school. I still played better. I got better. And then I decided to go travel in Europe. And, you know, I had a little bit more success. But as I started playing on a bigger stage, I started to see like wow, I'm still just not there. And the more I saw
By
that,
there you mean like competitive at that?
I could compete, but like when you look at the scheme of things, when you're playing futures, and futures are like, you have futures, then challengers, and you have like what you see like on TV, and then you have Grand Slams. I was struggling to compete at like qualifying rounds of futures. So like when you put that in perspective, you're like,
so many layers.
Yeah, there's so many layers. And so, you know, I had a great time. I love Spain, but it's like, and I did it again, and I got better. But the thing I started to, I mean, you start putting together, it's like the time frame you need to like stay out there, and the kind of strength you need mentally to continue to push through that and keep going. Guys would take like 5-6 years on tour just getting crushed to kind of make that little bit of break. And I just realized I couldn't do that. I couldn't stay out there financially. And then, you know, that mental hurdle of that. And I think for me, it just became like, let's see what you can do. What's the best you can become? Because at that point I realized, okay, I'm not becoming a pro. It's just not going to happen. But I love the game and I love competing. And I think that was like the change for me in perspective. Instead of like focusing so much on like the results of beating people, it's like, I just have to perform the best I can. And still, even with that, it was a hurdle, but it's like the perspective of focusing on the things you can control and being okay when, if you do lose a match, it's like, how did I lose that match versus that, oh, I just lost it and not getting anything out of it. So it became very much about how can I get things even out of my losses, because you start to realize when you're playing futures, you show up, you practice for about 3 or 4 days. You get there about almost like 5 days early. You practice, you get one shot, one match, one kill. You miss, you go home, or you don't go home. You go to the next tournament, you sit around, you practice, and you do this for like, for 6 weeks where you're just on the road. And I sometimes travel by myself. I pick up a friend and we travel. So it's like you develop strategies around like, dude, to stay in it, you have to focus on the right things. And so when my perspective changed from that, it really helped a lot. And it helped me have or learn the ability to love competing versus necessarily getting or hating so much about losing and destroying, like getting so caught up in losing. Don't get me wrong, I still hate losing, but there's a difference. And like you're saying, being gracious or having gratitude about being able to just compete, because I think that's another thing that really helps change your perspective and give you those moments of like, okay, you know, looking back, even though I felt like I wanted to bury myself, not a lot of people had that opportunity to even play at that stage, not even they get in the door. And to have that opportunity and then go to Europe and play twice and meet people and just experience a lot of cool things. I had one doubles match where I could have got a point, and we lost that like, I think it was like 4-2 or something. So I look back now with greater perspective, and I really appreciate those times.
Mine is a little different because I didn't play college or pro since I got hurt. So I think mine came when I was a lot younger because I was the youngest in our little academy. We had like 8 of us, and I was the youngest by at least 2 years. And so I was like the baby. And so I just got beat up on like 24/7 all the time. And so, and many of those players went on to be, a couple of the girls went on to be top 50 in doubles in the world. One was top 80 in the world. And so they were really high level players. And so I just lost to like every day of my life. And so I think that gave me a little bit different perspective. Truthfully, I started to kind of try to find little wins each time I played, even if I wasn't winning when I was really young. And so I think that was probably why, like, that's probably one of the biggest things now is coming up with small goals when I play, or like if we're playing points or anything, like small, like yesterday when we were playing with the opposite hand, my goal was to win a point, and I won, and I was like super pumped about it. You know what I mean? So I think it's really finding those small goals that made me want to stick it out, because I am a very big control freak. And so, and I would practice and practice and practice and practice and practice like 10 million hours a day. And then if I didn't get the result I wanted, that would be really frustrating. So I changed my perspective, I think, a lot younger. And then when I got hurt and had the different perspective of coaching, it's kind of the same aspect of like, you do this, and your students should be able to play nationals and play at these tournaments. And it doesn't, you can't make someone do something. And it's the same thing as tennis, like as a tennis coach too. You have to find the small goals. And that was, I think, really important for me.
Yeah, I think personality plays a big point
For sure.
About how you personally deal with things. Because definitely,
the same approach doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah, it really
No.
doesn't. Like I think perspective is one thing, but there's so many other like little avenues, even within for me finding perspective that we're playing on my personality. Like I'm a big like I can. Megan is gonna smile on this one. I always, for some reason, and it gets me in trouble, believe that I can make something better or get better, and so for me it was like
Even when it's already perfect, just so we're clear.
there's nothing ever perfect, Megan. Okay, so another topic. So for me, there's always this hunger. There's always this drive to push the limits, even if I'm okay with running into the wall a couple times, and I like that. And I think for me, my personality lended more towards like trying to figure out a way, even if I wasn't going to get there. It was like trying to continue to improve. And so I think that was for me easier to find that, to have the perspective kind of aid me a little bit, because I just felt like, you just have to figure it out. I mean, there's some way. It may take more time. And I would just change perspective for instance, in college or as I was playing a lot, I was like, if I can just stay out here longer than anybody else, I'm just going to make everybody like, they'll quit and I'll just be the last one standing. Whatever it was, I would just play mental games with myself. And I think it's just,
that doesn't work for me
it's
at
just
all.
personality, the way my brain kind of ticks about how to overcome or at least stick out adversity in some sense.
I need check boxes. I'm that type of person. Like I need goals.
I think
that
all three of us are different. Yeah.
No.
I go into the match with certain goals, and if those goals don't align, then I change my goals. But they're small goals that I am going to be able to like mentally check off in my mind. And so if I don't, because I need to have like my personality, I need to have some sort of goal that I accomplished in a match, and it can't be that I lost the freaking match. So it needs to be something that I feel good about the match, because if I'm feeling horrible over and over and over again, I just know myself, I'll just quit.
I can't do the checkbox thing because if I look back at the boxes and none of them are checked, then I'm just
I might
there's the like
tweak them,
negative like cycle.
but there are things that I can control. Like my goals or check boxes are always things within my control.
Yeah.
I don't like have like, things I can't control.
It's dangerous for me. And the whole like, don't remember how you explain it exactly. Like just kind
Pitbull.
of tricking yourself into like finding that next level. I was always like the try hard that like I would run through. I was like the Rafa like on a practice court. So like the effort, I always gave 100%, like no matter what. That was never my problem. I'm not saying it was a problem for you. For me, it was like, and it was almost like the combination of those two things, like my level of intensity and effort combined with the perfectionist, like I need to figure this out and solve this problem. And when it didn't happen, I knew I left it all out there and I couldn't have tried any harder. And when I couldn't reach whatever the goal was that I had, then that's when things got really bad, really dark for me. Like, so it has to be like big picture, like Zen, like, or else it all goes out the window in a hurry.
Yeah. Like when I hear that, there's a weird thing in my brain that goes, challenge accepted. And that's the way when something's like, someone like, Megan will tell you this. She's like, oh, you can't. And it's like, she knows never to tell me you can't do something or this is the only, because it's like my brain goes, and I have to I have to figure it out. I have to at least try. Like I can't accept that it's just that way. And maybe I'll figure it out for myself and I'll run up against that wall. But I'm like, in my mind, until I have done something to, like when you say like, I love the intensity, but for me it's intensity and then like there's just another way. So I do have some perfectionist kind of deals, but it's more so in a sense of like, have you tried every single possibility? Because I guarantee you haven't. So get your butt back out there.
I feel like the listeners at this point are just sitting there like, you guys need help.
Yeah,
we do.
For sure. We all need help. All right, third
All right,
one.
third question. What do you say to your crazy students? I say that in a very loving, empathetic, way.
This is going to be interesting, I think, because I'm foreseeing that it's going to be very much relatable to how we own,
Definitely,
how
yeah.
each of us deals with our craziness.
Yeah, for me, I think the approach I've been trying most, and yeah, you're 100% right. It definitely relates to myself and my own inadequacies. And that's kind of probably where it stems from. But I'm constantly trying to get my students, and there's certain students that are in total alignment with this, and those are the ones that I just, love spending time on the court with. But when I believe that when a tennis player can feel fulfilled and satisfied just by the process alone, like just by the journey of taking that next step, even if it was a painful step or a difficult one or one that on the outside looks like a loss, and to everybody it might literally, be a loss. When somebody can start to have that be their source of fulfillment, I think that's like the ultimate place to be as a tennis player, personally. And that's kind of what I try to steer players towards. I understand it's not going to work for everybody.
That's why there's three of us.
Exactly. One of us has the answer.
Yeah.
I feel like having a chime and going, ching.
Little finger, yeah.
Oh, Monk Westerman, speak to us.
Yeah. And I don't know that I've really sat and thought about it before, but it's definitely cathartic.
Yeah, for sure.
There's no question. But I think perfectionism is so pervasive among tennis players.
yeah.
I think it's a good general direction to try to get people to move towards. But I also accept and understand that not everybody's going to be satisfied by that answer.
But you have to embrace the craziness a little bit, because we used to always say every tennis player has some crazy in you, because if not, I feel like you can't reach that high level of play.
Well, we're all
you have
human.
to, right.
I feel like no matter what your flavor is, tennis is going to find it and it's going to poke it.
It exploits it though. And
for sure,
so
yeah.
if that craziness is overtaking you, then you just you never quite reach that.
It's like Venom and Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I feel like she's like, it's over. I can't fight it.
Yeah. Because I do the same. I give sorry, I'm skipping you.
No, it's fine.
I do little goals.
Yeah.
I'm a huge believer.
go ahead.
The same thing I just said about myself is what I used to teach my students. I would give them, okay, you can't control the outcome. Here's the things. We literally would go through here's the things you can control and here's the things you cannot control.
I think that's key, by the way, is being able to understand the difference between the two. Because most players...
Yeah, we talked about it all the time.
Yeah.
That was a huge thing, And then that's why, it would irritate the crap out of me when some kid would walk off the court and be like, it was really windy and I couldn't make the ball.
Why'd
and I'm
you
like,
lose?
it's
What would you
say,
windy
Megan?
on
What
the-
would you say?
I'd say it's windy on the other side of the court too. You got to figure it out. And, that wasn't one of the goals. So I would always relate it back to we would have two goals, what is your goal for blah, 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 or whatever. And it would be super, super specific. We've been working on getting your backhand deeper in the court, cross court on a cross court rally. That would be your goal. And so if they did better at accomplishing that during, a backhand exchange rally.
So just to play devil's advocate. So what if that on that particular day, that particular match, that particular opponent was just 2 levels above your student and they just could not even get even in the rally to possibly be able to achieve that goal? Then how do you pivot? How do you pivot at that point when backhand depth is just not happening that day?
We talk about that
As an
being
example.
a personal goal of trying to achieve. But then I'm really big on in match play, what's working and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
And every single, we used to say every 3 or 4 points, you evaluate what is working and what is not. And if you're not doing something that's working, if you're losing, every single point, then you're not changing what you're doing.
So does the
You
goal
need-
shift at that point?
Yes, yeah. The goal shifts. I mean, and most time there was very, very few times I will say that you could not at least say, you know what, I felt like my backhand felt better, or I was getting better depth on it when I had the opportunity, that kind of thing. And so there wasn't a lot of times where I tried to make it to where the goal was very accomplishable. Does that make sense?
Tie your shoes.
Yeah. Write your name correctly on the
Check the
test.
box.
Yeah,
Check the
box.
exactly.
Shoes are tied.
Yeah.
I win. No
Yeah.
matter what happens, I'm the winner here.
Yeah. Because I just feel like it's really important to, at a young age, when you're dealing with, and this is not necessarily adult. Like adults can, I think, handle a little bit more like, okay, you might have a goal, but you need to focus on something. But I think as kids, it's really hard to ask an 8-year-old to go out there, play a tennis match, deal with all these adult things, people cheating, the wind, there's all these other things.
Parents.
Parents, even things you can't control, and being like, okay, find your zen, 8-year-old child on the court. Like, love tennis, even though you're going to get your butt kicked. And you know what I mean? And so I would always try to find like one little thing that I felt like they could really accomplish. And then the other goal was a little bit of a stretch. And so that way they could at least say like, you know what?
You could high five them about something.
Right. Yeah. Like they came off the court and I could be like, you know what? This was pretty good. This was really bad. But this was, this was something that you did better. Plus it also, as a coach, helped me hold myself accountable, I felt like. Because there's so many times like a coach's self-worth is in line with whether the student wins or loses, especially in high junior development, and especially as a woman in the junior world, just because there's not a lot of us out there that everything was criticized and everything is watched, and every kid that you taught that lost at that high level, they didn't win that ball. They got bronze instead of gold, or they got, there was just so much pressure on coaches as well. I mean, I can tell you how many times I would sit there and be like not breathing, like hoping and praying that whatever was happening was going to keep happening. Yeah. I mean, you just, you're playing. It's harder than playing half the time. But
You remember your tiebreak record. I always remember that.
Oh,
It's
for
like
sure.
phone call tiebreak record.
Yeah.
I was
on
lethal.
point.
Yeah,
I was too.
yeah, it's like-
yeah. We used to compete. I know that's hard to say. But yeah, so that's my 2 cents. But I do think it's funny how it goes in line with, and I think your students find coaches that you align things with.
Yeah.
Like Kevin's kids
Very
were
different from
very
Megan's
different from my kids that I taught. And same with adults too.
Yeah.
Like the adults that took from me on a regular basis, very, very different from the adults that took from Kevin.
And they're attracted to the way you
Yeah.
teach your personality.
They're
and-
attracted to your craziness, your type of craziness.
Yeah.
It's kind of like getting married.
Yeah.
She's attracted to my kind of craziness.
I don't know how that happened.
KG.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one. I think I've changed throughout the years because I think part of that's my personality. I am subject to the shiny object, and I'm always trying to learn something new. So I think my first sense of is probably, you would not believe this, but I'm slightly rah-rah. So meaning that extreme positivity under stress, extreme kind of like, for me, it's like I got to get
You
myself
want your
going.
kids to fake it?
No, not fake it. Just change their emotional state. I think
He would get them all he had this class.
I would do these
He had a
speeches.
clap.
I could have I had for instance, we would talk about goals, but there was I had this sense of what's the song, a Rocky song in the back of my
He
head
would
as
play
I'm
Rocky.
giving speeches. And I remember we had a semifinal in a national, and 2 kids came off the court. And I was like, okay, guys, you got to listen here. And I gave them the specifics, you got to go out there and fight. No, I don't care what happens, no matter what. And it's I just build this moment, and you can see them shaking, and it's and then okay, you ready? You got this? Look at me now. Look at me. You've got this right now. Now go out there and take it. Yeah. And literally
everyone their ears just hurt right there. I'm sorry about that.
But literally kids would go out and just emotionally.
You had the Braveheart speech down.
Yeah, I totally would. And I found that to some extent, if you find the right people, by having such an attitude and sense of emotional state that like is belief. And it was a lot of about like me making people believe that they could do things that sometimes they just didn't in that moment believe. And I would give them like one specific thing. I was like, okay, this is what you need to do. But I mean, beyond that, you have to believe right here, right now. This is your moment. And I won a lot of matches off of that for myself. And I help people, adults, whatever, win a lot of matches because I think a lot of it is, I would say, 90% of people struggle believing in themselves when it comes to accomplishing something.
But I think it depends
on the person. But I think
some students get so riled up
that
they can't play tennis.
Well, here's the thing,
and I get turned off by my personality.
Time out, people. It's also about the person because I did have some students where I would totally go to and I'd be like super calm, but I'd insert the same message, but with a different tone. Where I would like I had a little girl who was like, okay, look, this is what you need to do. I know you can do this. And it would be totally calm, but it's the same message, but delivered in a different way. Yeah. And I would know, like we were talking earlier about a kid that he would always want to break his racket. And I knew in his mind he was a control freak. And so, like, if he wanted to break his racket, I would be like...
Chase Tomlins, this is you.
Yeah. You knew it was you, but I mean, Megan just had to say it. Someone's going to find you now.
Yeah, now somebody else is going to be like,
But he would always want to break it. I was like, snap that racket. I would tell him, like, snap it right now. Snap it in front of me. Break it on the court right. And he would look at me like, oh, he just couldn't do it. And so a lot of what I felt like I was doing, I was always trying to find those psychological triggers of people and either turn them on or turn them off, like with how I would say stuff, and either motivate or take down the emotion. Because a lot of what I felt like helped me a lot was understanding either I needed to get myself to get to that next level of energy or calm myself down. And then when I got there, I could start to find answers and look for things to happen. And I mean, both of you guys know me. I mean, I get pretty excited about little things. Like last VIP when like she made 2 out of 3 serves.
Yeah, he jumped around
I was
the course.
like so pumped. But I mean, that's just my personality. So I do probably tend to attract people like that. But I think it's for me as a coach is like, or you out there, it's like finding for me, what's that emotional trigger? Like some people, when it gets to be really tough, they need to be calm. Some people need to be really excited. Some people need to feel like, they can't lose this or they need to win this or whatever it is. It's like finding that and getting your mental state there first. And then once you're there, I think a lot of answers pop up. And if you have a coach, they can help you pinpoint those 1 or 2 things you need to do. Because I think a lot of times when you're not in the emotional place to find answers or to even be open to them, it doesn't matter. Like if I go to a kid or an adult and they're like so down on themselves, I'm like, dude, all you have to do is hit it to their backhand. They just literally cannot hear it because they're so negative or so trapped in their hole. So it's like first for me, always focus on the emotional part first and then give them the instructions later to make sure that like they have the attitude to carry themselves through. So that's what I would do. I would always have like literally Rocky theme song or some like Lose Yourself Eminem on my phone. It's like literally I come over to a kid if I knew it. It's like slide the phone over. It's like dun 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 dun.
And I would want to kill him every time. Like that stuff just annoys me.
Yeah, or I had one kid, one last story, who he was playing a tiebreak. He just wasn't playing that well, and he wasn't really trying that hard. And I told him, and I said, what was it? I told him to eat like some snacks. I kept giving him snacks. And I said, okay, look at me. If you don't go out there and win this match and play your butt off, I'm going to make you throw up what you just ate right now. That was Brew. He'll tell you a story. I was like, if you come off that court and you do not, yeah. Because he was kind of like tanking a little bit. And I was like, if you don't come off that court playing your butt off, I'm going to make you throw up. You see the sidewalk? I'm going to make you throw your snack up. And he was like, he knew I was going to do it. And he played the best match, like the best tiebreak ever. And
but you're dealing those.
But here's the key.
Children.
I know the personality, and I knew what to press the button, and I knew it there at that time. I didn't need to talk about tactics. I needed to threaten his life. And if I threatened his life, he completely walked off court, and he looked at me like, "Dude, that worked. What you said worked." I was like, yeah, don't you ever do that. And so for me, it was always finding those buttons and pressing them. Hee hee.
Well, on that note, I think there's a whole nother topic here, and that is the difference between working with kids and working with adults. Like, you can't really go to an adult and be like, I'm going to make you throw up on the sidewalk after the match.
No, yeah, I totally agree. But I think even with adults,
you have to know your student.
You have to know your student,
yeah.
and you have to know how to press the buttons. And I guess the examples.
Yeah, I'm not saying there's not.
Yeah, the examples.
Jedi mind tricks going on.
Yeah, it's always, even with adults, it's like the example is like, how do you need to say how do they need to hear this message? Yeah.
But I think it's important for the student to figure that out too. Like, as a student, when I have adults and I say, how do you best learn? That's how I always started everything. Like, how do you best learn? Visually, like, do I need to write it down? Like, learning how someone learns so that you can help them the best way. And as a player, knowing that.
Yeah, totally. This is exactly what I was doing. Thanks for summing that up.
All right, with that, I think we're going to wrap up. Any final thoughts, Kevin and Megan?
I think just you gotta know thyself. It all stems from knowing thyself, and as you have the craziness, it's figuring more out about yourself in those moments of how do you deal with the crazy. Because I think, the more you embrace it and the more you figure out how you're going to operate your patterns of being crazy, the more you can hack it and figure out how you can better respond or avoid those situations altogether. And I think when you can truly learn from your craziness or your moments of craze, that you can really embrace it and become a better tennis player.
Thanks for listening, everybody. And thank you so much to everybody who's been leaving ratings and reviews. We're already one of the top rated tennis podcasts on iTunes. As of right now, we're number 4, which is awesome, out of dozens and dozens on the iTunes Music Store. So thanks, everybody. And we still have that offer through September 31st. If you leave us a rating and a review on the iTunes Music Store, or if you have an iPhone on the podcast app, and send us a screenshot of it, we'll be happy to hook you up with the course of your choice from Essential Tennis, any of our digital training resources. You can check out a list of those at essentialtennis.com/courses, and just send a screenshot with your selection and your rating and your review to support@essentialtennis.com, and Megan will hook you up.
Yes, indeed.
Megan's got the hookup.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Thank you, everybody, so much for your support. Thanks for listening. It's been a lot of fun. I really like these conversations a lot. I hope
you listen.
Yeah. I look forward to doing more of them because I enjoy doing it. I think it's good for us, like, collectively, and hopefully those of you listening feel the same way.
And if you have some ideas, send them our way.
We're looking for ideas, for topics. So you can also send those to support@essentialtennis.com. Any topic that you think is controversial or good one that's kind of polarizing, that's a good one to discuss or debate. Definitely send that in. With that, we'll sign off. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Take care.